Hello, everybody. Welcome. It's 7:01 p.m. on the East Coast. We are in New York, so that's Eastern time. 7:01 p.m. on this. For those of you who believe that there's a globe, there's always a fresh
show over.
The first 60 seconds. Anyway, we're here on a Thursday night. And J Gulinello, I have dragged him in. I said, Jay, I know you're coming on next Friday, but you know what? I'm giving the whole JFK thing at least 48 hours. I can't. We couldn't do it in real time. 24 hours is too short with everybody pining through 60,000 scanned documents and all that stuff. And then of course we had a wonderful guest, Jane Barlow, who you know, last night. Yeah. And I said, all right, you know what? Come in on Thursday. We got to talk a little bit of JFK. And
I love this topic, man. It reminds me of, I think I was telling you offline a little bit about the fact that when the Warren Commission report was released, the 26 volumes, that the New York Times, I think, had an op-ed that basically after 48 hours, they said, yep, Warren Commission completely vindicates the FBI investigation, the Dallas police investigation, Lee Harvey Oswald, 6th floor, Texas School Book Depository.
It was crazy. They didn't have Chat GPT back then.
Right.
How did they read it?
Right, exactly. And actually, Mark Lane, who wrote that, kind of like one of the first premier groundbreaking books called Rush to Judgment on the Kennedy assassination, it took him like 18 months. Him and Jim Garrison, I think it took them like over a year to read the damn 26 volumes. And then he wrote a letter to the editor to the New York Times and said, geez, how'd you manage to figure it all out in 2 days? It took me 18 months. And of course, then the hit campaign was on for Mark Lane because he became like really one of those first outspoken people. He did some great research. But yeah, I mean, a lot of documents. I mean, to be honest, 48 hours isn't enough. It's going to take so long to put some of these dots together, but it's exciting to be able to have the opportunity to do it in real time.
I've got a pretty good amount of stuff here tonight. We can read a nice article that came out yesterday from the World Net Daily. Then I have this thread that I started on Twitter on the Quite Frankly Speakeasy community over there, which got what did you notice about this? And did anything that has been made public now change the conclusions you had already drawn to this point in any way? There's also been quite a bit that we've been just dropping in along the way on the Quite Frankly Telegram. You know what? I just got to talk about this right off the bat.
Okay.
This is my favorite one because there's a lot of insights into the CIA, which of course is inextricably linked to everything. It's stupid. It's so stupid.
The tentacles are everywhere.
Oh yeah. And there's so many interested parties in here that we got so much more on Israel's involvement than I thought that we would. If anything was going to be left, and again, we're going to do a lot of this in I want to do the Egypt thing first, but it's an interesting thing, and it begs some questions about, okay, now what? That it wasn't a complete letdown of what you could have expected to have seen at all. What we would have expected to have been collected and preserved at all. Now what? Because I think there's a big, I think when you talk about the so-called truth community, there is a comfort in the black pill. And there's almost a comfort in being let down at this point. Yeah. Because if you get what you want, if you're that dog that finally chases and catches the car wheel, now what?
Right.
And especially since we can't really, as an individual, I'm sure if I went through people in the audience right now and said, call in based on what you've seen and what you have already picked up along the way over the years, what is your prescription?
Right.
What's your prescription? What's the prescribed action for what comes next? I'm sure we would be able to come up with a nice laundry list of how to start cleaning up our country. And I think it would probably get pretty interesting because I'm not necessarily in the camp that obviously when something happens over 60 years ago, not a lot of people are going to be alive. That's number one. So the real question is, how do you move on with adequately acknowledging a past that had once been buried and making sure that it never happens again?
That's the big thing, right? I mean, you need, yes. I think you need that. I mean, like you said, we're sort of long past actual justice in terms of most of the people that are alive that are now dead. But more to learn because people need to understand what their government was and is therefore capable of, so that it doesn't happen again. That's why it matters, because it is a sort of linchpin in history. It's a marker that really needs to be fully understood, and I think that would help bring over a lot of the people who are still kind of on the fence about how true it. Like, you look at COVID, right? Like if the U.S. government in some level of involvement is capable of murdering its own commander in chief, you don't think they're capable of doing something like COVID?
Oh, I mean, yeah.
Come on, right? But if you don't believe that, and you don't believe it's possible that, hijackers from planes were given passports and were, and you don't believe any of those things are possible, then you will believe that COVID was exactly what it was purported to be, and you will believe the next thing. And that, to me, is why it's important. I would have loved to have seen people face justice. I would have loved to have seen Alan Dulles face justice. It's over for people like that. But now we have to use this as a classroom education tool, as how society moves forward and never allows this kind of stuff to happen again. That's what this is all about.
Right. And like I was talking about with Robert Phoenix the other night there too, is it makes everything else make so much sense. I had to play some obscene comments that Ben Shapiro made yesterday or whatever the hell it was. It's out of this world.
That guy, dude. Wow. Anyway, out of this world. We'll play that in the second half. Out of this world. Yeah,
But when you think about Jack Kennedy, and here's the other thing here too, because of all this, it really overshadows the fact that he wasn't really the best president.
No, he also didn't have a ton of time, but.
Didn't have a ton of time, and there is, for example, U.S. aid is something we've been talking about a lot this year. That stuff like that is him. He's a progressive,
sure.
And there's a lot that we can probably criticize, but you can't do that over the last 60 years, because what you've seen is that with any modicum of resistance to the will of the shadow state, there is that he was gone.
Yeah,
and it was so many converging interests now at this point that we can see. Just in plain day, when he's gone, obviously LBJ was a willing beneficiary. I have a really hard time making this guy the mastermind. He's definitely a willing beneficiary of the hit. And then you have Nixon, who he had to be removed at the height of his popularity. And then you have a lot of stooges along the way. And even when you had somebody that was riding an organic wave of populism again, like Reagan, returning back to more small government value, he really got the country interested in that again. And they tried to kill him. And of course, Kennedy's one of his chief murderers was the VP.
Exactly.
And it's just
you're right.
It's been one long line of events that really. That was an incredible focal point, blast point.
I think JFK was really naive, and I think he was learning. I think it's similar to Trump. I think he was learning on the job, because obviously he was considerably younger as well as he was learning on the job, and I think he was starting to untangle things in real time. And National Security Action Memorandum 263 was the withdrawal of troops from Vietnam, the beginning of the end of what ended up becoming Vietnam after JFK died, because the next National Security Action Memorandum was signed by Lyndon B. Johnson, which completely reversed 263. So when I was in high school, that was the fight that I had with my history teacher. That's what launched my entire thing into this, because I said, well, it seems like there's a lot of inference that Kennedy was trying to begin to tamp down Vietnam. And she said, well, there's no evidence of that. And then, of course, in declassified documents in 1999, we found that NSAM 263, which essentially did start to withdraw troops from, not necessarily troops, but advisors and the people that were over there. So he was full on understanding what was happening, and I think that was happening in real time. And once they knew they couldn't control him, for example, Bay of Pigs is the same thing. They thought they could twist his arm into providing air support for the rebel Cubans. He didn't give in. He let them. He said, "We're not getting involved in this." And then they realized we have a problem on our hands. And I think that's kind of when the wheels in motion started, because there were several opportunities where Kennedy could have just rolled over and he didn't. So I think he was learning on the job, which is that's a challenge.
Yeah. Yep.
So,
I think we're going to have an ability, we're going to have some chances to get around to a lot of this tonight.
Yeah.
There's also hold on. Let's do this real quick, because It doesn't really have too much to do with Kennedy. I guess it does. It showed up in all this stuff, but we're getting also a glimpse into the methods of the CIA. And of course, this particular method is not going away. The honeypot, the good old honeypot.
Yeah.
Take a listen to this. It's a little, I don't know who the hell this poor woman was that they're talking about. They're calling her Lekuki. Lekuki.
Sounds
all right.
about right.
So there's some kind of an operation that's going on in Cuba or Mexico and I guess they're putting this old girl out to pasture because she just can't cut it anymore. Listen to this. Now, when it comes to sex, let me get you up on screen with me. There you go. In this case, they write, the lack of the same Lekuki, one, I guess is the person, Cookie, comes always to emotional involvement with her male associates, and her case officers cannot fulfill this need, thus giving rise to problems. In the past, Lekuki, number one, could easily obtain her physical emotional fulfillment in Cuba and Mexico without relying on case officer, but now she is getting older and quite shop-worn. And cannot compete for attention from men in the environment of a place such as Manhattan.
Whoa.
So they're talking about, I guess, some ops that they're running in Manhattan to try to get cozy up to one mark or another. And after all the time she spent banging people for the CIA in Cuba and Mexico, she's just a little shop-worn.
Yeah, shop-worn, that's a great term.
It's just incredible. So we have this little excerpt here about a CIA prostitute. Imagine her retirement party. Thank you, Donna. Thank you, Donna, for your years of service. But it's lost its magic.
Yeah, we're kind of all.
Nobody works.
That's incredible.
I know.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, it just goes to show you people just think this stuff isn't real. I don't know. I just live in a different world. I guess I've just read too much and learned too much over the years to think that the world is what you think it is. This kind of stuff is just very obvious. And that's another thing, hopefully, we find in some of these documents. It's just sort of confirmation of things that we already knew were true, but now to see it in writing is like, okay, cool. So then when people think something like a honeypot operation, like, for instance, bring it to today, who was the I forget his name, Swalwell. Eric Swalwell, right, with the honeypot operation with the Chinese spy. That would never happen. It was happening in the 1960s. I mean, it's like the oldest, trap.
I know, and you know what? The quality of statesman or stateswoman that we have working for us right now is so low that sex doesn't even come to the equation a lot of times. You remember Dianne Feinstein was being shuttled?
Yeah.
You heard it was like a chauffeur and an office manager was a Chinese spy for like 2 decades.
Yeah, and I think the quality of elected official is so low that they're just not very smart streetwise anymore. I mean, especially because some of them have spent their entire lives in politics, like Joe Biden, for instance. As far as I know, never really had a job. He's just 50 years in the Senate. What a waste. That's why you don't know anything about the real world, Joe.
Yeah.
Because you never really did anything in the real world. Right. Amazing.
Well,
Amazing.
Speaking of real world, we'll get it at 7:15. Oh, man. You know what? Let's start this. Let's start the show off. We'll do this next little couple of clips that I wanted to do, and then we're going to jump into this Egypt story.
Okay.
Because claims that are being made are like mind-blowing.
I'm totally unfamiliar with this, so I'm looking forward to it.
Right. Yeah. And listen, there's quite a few people who are like, I'm reserving judgment until more comes out about the methods of what has been discovered or is being, posited right now. But other than that, it made for a really interesting 24 hours to 36 hours of people passing things. Because it was published, this stuff was published on the 16th. And last night it really started getting around, and I said, all right, well, you know what? We're going to have to split this. We're going to have to split this in half and do a little JFK and a little bit of this other thing. So we're going to get to that. J Gulinello's in the studio. You guys are at home. I hope that you're going to be calling in later on. I'm also going to be taking calls on the Discord. So get into the Discord and start mixing it up over there. And we will be back in a flash. Let's get to it.
You let one ant stand up to us, then they all might stand up. Those puny little ants outnumber us 100 to 1. And if they ever figure that out, there goes our way of life. It's not about food. It's about keeping those ants in line. That's why we're going back. Does anybody else want to stay? Let's ride!
More readily. So I suppose that form could if you took it in a high enough dose, but I honestly haven't ever seen any research on magnesium and hallucinations or vivid dreaming or anything.
I'm going to stop with the magnesium at night.
Why? This has happened more than once?
I've been taking it the last 3 to 4 days, and I haven't had the best night's sleep.
Interesting, because that's usually what it's for.
I know. And sometime one night, like maybe 2 or 3 nights ago, I woke up and I heard something, what I thought was coming from the hallway or from Aurora's room. I said, what the hell is that? Like 2 a.m. I popped up. 2 a.m. is like a very strange time of day for me. And I realized, no. It's not Aurora's room. It's coming from the living room. It's coming from somewhere else. And then I said, wait, no. Then I think I just started waking up a little bit more.
Oh.
And I forget what I was hearing.
Oh, interesting.
I forget what I was hearing because I wish I can recreate the sound for you. And I went down and I just took a look around and everything was fine. I was like, what the fuck did I just hear? And I don't know.
Okay.
I'm gonna delete it from my little.
Experiment a little bit, because I mean, I love magnesium, and if I don't use it usually, because most people are deficient in magnesium with how active I am, I end up with cramps, leg cramps. I'll wake up with a leg cramp. I know when I haven't had enough minerals. So that's interesting. And it's magnesium glycinate, correct? That's the form you're taking? Yeah. And that's usually a very readily bioavailable form too. Do you remember the dose you're taking?
I think I had 200 milligram capsules.
So 400, yeah. I mean, you can also try cutting it in half.
Yeah, we'll see.
But
we'll see. Maybe I'll just slug some more salt water before bed. That never steered me wrong. Yeah. I don't know. And people want, Frank, have you ever done shrooms? Oh, yeah. I can't even
do magnesium.
Can't do magnesium, my friend. I can't do magnesium. I start seeing bunnies.
That's hysterical.
Oh, weird.
Okay.
All right. Well, I just wanted to ask you.
Keep us updated.
Anyway, so let's see here. Oh, okay. Real quick. You're talking about whether or not somebody can learn anything. Apparently, we are going to be getting some sort of a executive order to dismantle the Department of Education.
That was supposed to be today, yeah?
Well, this was posted at 6:11 p.m. From the Trump War Room and retweeted by Elon Musk. Okay. This was from today. Take a listen to this. I think it's that Stephen Miller guy.
Well, as we know, the Department of Education here in Washington, D.C. is overwhelmingly staffed by radical left Marxist bureaucrats who are in every way hostile to Western civilization, hostile to American interests, and hostile to our founding documents and culture. And so they are using their position and influence inside the Department of Education to try to force agendas like radical gender ideology, like critical race theory, like diversity, equity, and inclusion, and all kinds of anti-America curricula and policies on the American people, on our students, on our children. So it's taking away from parents the ability to control and direct the education of their own kids, of their own families. So what we're going to do under President Trump's leadership and direction is to return that authority to the greatest extent possible to the local level where parents can control outcomes, while at the same time making sure that no federal funds are used to support racism, to support gender ideology, or support other ideas and principles that are offensive to the American taxpayer.
To the extent possible is get rid of it. We had nearly 200 years of America, and we were actually well respected educationally.
I know.
Philosophically, everything else. We were doing very well.
We don't seem to measure anything by outcomes anymore, do we?
No.
Like, I mean, I'm not even, let me just play the devil's advocate and say, okay, you created the Department of Education. I'm sure the reason behind it, let's just say it was altruistic and we were trying to improve this, that, okay, well, it didn't work. I mean, why is it so hard to abandon ideas that are objective, measurable failures? Like in my field, like the food pyramid. Why can't we let that go? It never worked. It didn't work. There was never any evidence behind it. The summer of 1977, there was a whole bunch of debate, and it's failed us. Our health has gotten precipitously worse.
It's worked. It's worked for somebody though, and you know, in
one guy
in the Department of Education's case, it's definitely worked for spitting crazy women like Randy Weingarten,
right?
And all these these union reps that show up and they scream like these mad harridans. He's like,
that's why
this is who's benefited from it, because it's not our math scores.
No,
it's certainly not that. You know, so it's we'll see. The Fox News Chiron says soon, Trump signs order dismantling the education department. Do we learn about that before this show ends? I don't know, but I hope it's all, you know,
1979 wasn't even that long ago. You know, people act like it's been around forever.
I know. There was no education before 1979.
Didn't you know?
we didn't.
We all walked around like
we didn't have the.
It was idiocracy before then.
It makes you wonder how did cities like New York City get built? How did Boston and New York City and
I heard they were already here.
Yeah, they were already here. I was told that. So the Yankee Stadium's been already been here.
I mean,
it was repurposed.
I'm very open-minded.
Yeah, me too. I have to be.
I know.
Okay, so here's another one for you. So you want to talk about what the Department of Education churns out. Here's just a little bit of what's been going on lately. Obviously, we have Pam Bondi, who just the other day declared that these are domestic terrorism attacks. When you talk about people who are going and burning charging stations for Teslas, they are actually doing drive-by shootings of some dealerships.
Whoa, I didn't know that.
Oh, yeah, it's just shooting buildings. All over the country, Tesla owners have been, because you know that their Teslas, they can go into, I learned recently, they can go into what they called sentry mode. And every Tesla has, I don't know how many cameras all around it. So it can create an entire bubble of surveillance. Cool. It's cool if you're the property owner.
Right.
If it's, you know, if it's just the next door neighbor every time you walk outside in a bathing suit. But, you know, what people are seeing is that not only are crazy motherfuckers just driving up next to them in traffic, staring into the Tesla as if they are expecting to see Elon Musk himself, and then through their liberal nut job training, flipping the bird, scaring children in the back, screaming at people. One guy, people are going up and writing swastikas over things.
Dude, this is the definition of mass formation, just like during COVID. Do these people in the cross wiring of their what used to be known as a brain, they realize that most of these people probably own Teslas because, well, some of them anyway, some percentage of them, because they're trying to save the environment, right? Like the irony of this is so thick, it's unbelievable. It's really shocking that these people are that dim of a bulb that they don't realize, they don't even know who's sitting in that car. It could be one of them. It could be one of their own. But they're done.
Listen to I want to show you a couple of rationalizations, because this is the more important thing here. Understanding who needs to be dealt with and what their mindset is. This is from one Claire Lehman, okay? Said, I'm sorry, but the world's wealthiest individual leveraging their wealth for political influence and power cannot claim victimhood when the inevitable backlash engulfs his business interests. Yeah, okay. So you know it's crazy here, because when people were upset that Bud Light got into the gender dysphoria game and pushed the whatever that guy's name is,
Dylan Mulvaney.
Yeah. So when they got into that game, people simply said, I find this abhorrent and I want nothing to do with it. Some of them made goofy videos buying 18 packs and bringing it to the shooting range and all that stuff. But they weren't waiting outside of
barbecues,
7-Elevens.
Yeah.
They weren't beating people up, whatever. Right. So yeah, there was a boycott. Some people took advantage of a void in the market and promoted their own new beer. Whatever, a Patriot beer. Yeah. It was whatever. But nobody was scribbling swastikas onto things or shooting beer distributors we're talking about two different types of animals here. And too many people like this Claire have said, again, to be clear, property damage is obviously wrong, both morally and legally. That's her CYA moment there. I'm simply highlighting the narcissism involved in engaging in total warfare and then expressing shock when it affects their business interest. Total warfare.
So she's proceeding from the conclusion, which is like one of those, legal tactics. I mean, you just assume that your proposition is correct, and therefore all of your twisted logic on top of that premise is therefore correct. Wow,
they've completely washed their hands of any kind of accountability. Everything that they do is righteous, and when it comes to violence, they don't necessarily like it because they're so joyful.
The tolerant left.
They don't like because they're joyful. Their natural state of being is joy and love, as we know. Ooh. But at the same time, if things continue to not go their way, you can't really blame anyone for the it's sad, but yet predictable outcome when it comes to vanquishing evil. They have to vanquish evil. It's total war, after all. Yeah. Is shooting a couple of car dealerships and trying to get police to murder podcasters such a steep price to pay? It's just nuts.
Yeah,
it's nuts. Here's another one. Jessica Denson, this crazy bitch, said this outside of the White House the other day. Listen to this.
Get this man out of here now. But if that doesn't happen, and we're not promoting it for 1 second.
Oh yeah, the caveat.
But if that doesn't happen, there will be violence. Yep. Yes. And these people had the opportunity to stop it.
You just have to bend the knee.
If you just go away, there will be peace.
Wow, they're so tolerant. She's such a tolerant woman.
Listen, man. Wow. I mean, we're in a position we can sit back and we can laugh at these fucking nut jobs. But there also needs to be some active part of society that takes her off the street and locks her away in a birdcage. Mm-hmm. I mean, I'm sorry here.
I wonder what her personal life is like.
Oh my God. I can smell it.
Like a nightmare.
Absolutely. and then it's just, they're essentially saying even if you're violently attacked, it's your fault.
Yeah.
And here is something that has made a lot of people, this is the last clip I have, because this I think just came out today. And people are wondering what the hell this vampire is even talking about. Chuck Schumer, who's been getting it like a lot of criticism because he didn't stop the spending bill and he's not resisting enough. He went on The View and now he's making some kind of a statement about how they're going to be mobilizing Democrats, especially in New York, to fight Donald Trump. He has forced himself to get radical. He's forced himself to say radical things.
God, these people.
Because
they
I don't know.
Stand for nothing, Frank.
No.
Stand for nothing.
Not at all. But listen to this. 29 seconds. That'll really make you ponder.
We are mobilizing in New York. We have people going to the Republican districts and going after these Republicans who are voting for this and forcing them to either change their vote or face the consequences. This is a long, relentless fight that we fight every day. And I am confident that we will bring Trump's popularity, numbers, and strength down if we keep at it and keep at it and keep at it. No. No, you won't.
Did you see the way New Jersey trended in the last election? Nobody wants you, Chuck.
Hey, what does he think going into Republican districts is going to... What is it going to do? He said, we're going to go into Republican districts. We're going to find the people who voted for this. And we are going to either make them change their vote or make them face the consequences.
Yeah, what does that mean?
This is the messaging that they have resorted to. It's...
Yeah, and I don't, I never play What About, but imagine if that came from the other side. Imagine if Donald Trump said face the consequences, the media would run with headlines. Donald Trump, claims he's going to stab Chuck Schumer. It's like, wait, what? Yeah, it's incredible. And it's indicative of a rudderless ship at this point. And I hope, my hope, and I'm sure a lot of your audience, the hope is that they continue to spiral, because the people that see this kind of unhinged behavior are now more than ever. And I mean, some of the polling I've seen is like, yeah, Trump's numbers may have come down to earth because they were kind of through the roof in terms of approval rating, but people by and large are very much in favor of what's happening right now. This is when they say, is this what you voted for? I love it on Twitter. You always see, yeah. This is exactly what I want. This is exactly what I voted for.
In fact, I want to get behind Donald Trump physically and push him faster.
I know. I do too. This isn't enough. Let's go.
Yeah.
I totally agree.
I want to put the nitrous boost in the tank. I don't know what the hell. Dude, man. There is that's what I was thinking about before when I heard that. And I think about the State of the Union, the joint session of Congress, and what we saw over there. And I kept saying to myself, man, whatever the hell Marley Hornick or anybody out there that is fighting and investigating what's going on in their state as far as voting goes, if any of those prescriptions are taken up seriously and right now with great urgency by this administration, I would be so curious as to what minority share of the Congress Democrats shrink to in 2026. I would be so curious by fall of 2026 to see what they shrink to. I mean, they were acting, they were pretending that they were happy in 2024, and they got their asses handed to them. Okay. And that is with pretending that you're happy and us all seeing the reality, that juxtaposition of who you are and this bullshit community mask you're putting on.
Right.
Okay. You're not happy people. You're fucking dangerous. You're a danger to yourself and others. And they still got their asses handed to them. I would love to see, if all things were equal and we really cleaned up the states and how they process voting and these machines and everything else that goes into it, with all of the millions of discrepancies that are on the books just in New York alone. I would love to see what they do in an election where we know who they are because we see how they act. And the mask they're putting on top of it now is just, we're going to make you pay the consequences. Oh, God.
Yeah.
How the hell is that going to turn their fortunes around?
Well, did you see, what's his name? The would-be vice president there, Tim Walz, is that his name? I think. The doofus governor of Minnesota, on with Gavin Newsom, the used car salesman, in the podcast. They did, because Gavin Newsom has a podcast now. Of course he does. Because he's trying to become the 2028 candidate, I'm sure, and he's trying to moderate himself in the face of crazy. And Tim Walz gets on there and says, and just like casts aspersions on like basically every male that is for what's happening. They're just bad people. Now, he was specifically talking about like the influencers, like the Joe Rogans, these people. They're bad people. It's just remarkable how these people can just generalize vast swaths of people who don't agree with them as bad people. It's really incredible. And again, this is the party of tolerance. This is the party of inclusion. As long as you don't think differently.
Oh, yeah.
We just want you to look different. We want you to have all the different color hair and all that stuff. But if you dare think differently, you will pay the consequences.
That's it.
According to Chuck Schumer.
And then, when we talk about JFK a little bit later on, and you say, okay, well, what are you doing from here? Regardless of what you're focusing on the most, what was responsible, what group is most responsible, and all that, who made out the best, whatever. Regardless of that, what do you do? Well, the same thing, I think the same thing applies to what we're dealing with right now, even if it's just, I want to be free from people like Chuck Schumer.
Yeah.
And I'm not leaving the country. I'm not playing that stupid damn game.
You're not going to go with Rosie O'Donnell to Ireland?
I'm not going to Ireland. I'm not going to Ireland with Rosie O'Donnell to whistle off the cliffs. And it's not going to happen. But the whole point here again is, whether it's a domestic issue or whether it's an international issue, most of them are solved by completely breaking apart the centers of power and returning things to community first decision making across all all categories in life.
Yes.
In civic life. And that is not a pipe dream. It's actually our starting point. Now you can say, is it politically possible for us to attain that goal right now, to work backwards? As they, well, you know what? Like I told all my anarcho-capitalist friends, who they seem saner and saner to me every year, the stateless society people, because I say, well, hey, I see the world you want to live in, and I know I could survive there, and I know I think we would do a lot better off. But if we're thinking practically here, it is a lot easier to me to say, well, if we went to a constitutional convention and we tried to ratify the Constitution of 1787 right now, it would not happen. There was no caucus. There's no caucus, American caucus that can ratify that right now. So the one thing we have working for us is that a truly libertarian document for governance here in this country has already been codified. It's already been ratified. Right. It's there. It's the law. Now, on top of it is 200 plus years of usurpation and really bad habits. So if you're going to tell me, what would you rather want, Frank, a wasting disease to get rid of 95% of the people, like in The Stand, or an asteroid that wipes everything out and you truly have a clean slate at starting from nothing, or find some kind of way to get in to turn the tide culturally and get new generations to start wanting less of what is making us all miserable. Right. Because if we can just turn back the clock a little bit while we still all have our lives, and we still have the infrastructure in place, then perhaps we really could, that it's already there. I mean, that was our starting point. Some of our founders actually thought that it would actually be that over time, we would even need less and less of that, and we'd be able to go completely stateless in many ways. Right. I mean,
it's human nature to continue to build upon things. It's very rare. I mean, RFK would say this a lot, especially during COVID, the greater and greater the concentration of power, RFK Jr., that is, the greater the concentration of power, the less likely it is to ever recede. It's just very rare because it's not in human nature to say, okay, well, this thing did what it was supposed to do. Now let's get rid of it.
Right.
I mean, again, just to go back to what I do, the perfect example of that is the Senate Select Committee on Nutrition and Human Needs, the one that drafted the first dietary guidelines. Do you know that originally they were just supposed to address malnutrition because that was an actual problem back then? And they were on their way out the door. And as a last ditch effort, Senator McGovern said, and his little minions, they were like, well, why don't we just do something? I mean, we're here. Let's create dietary guidelines. And then they literally screwed us all because they just couldn't let it go, because it's just not in our nature necessarily to say, my job is done here. I'm going to go back and do my own thing and not try to rule everybody's life and not try to micromanage everybody's diet now. I mean, it's one of the most absurd things to think that the government should be dictating what we eat. But like you said, we've gotten so used to it now that those dietary guidelines, well, you may not care about them, and I laugh at them. They're important because they inform school lunches. They inform what gets served in a hospital, what the military eat, all of these things. That's why they're a problem. That's why they need to be disbanded. Yeah. But we just have a hard time doing that naturally, and it has to be forced upon us. And that's why what Trump is doing is so difficult. People don't, look, I'm not an apologist for any politician, but I see what he is up against. And it is unfathomable on all the different fronts, between foreign wars and the fires lit by the Biden administration economically, all of these things, to think that he can just, people are like, oh, well, he's not doing this. And I'm like, come on, give the guy a break. I mean, again, I'll call a spade a spade. If we're sitting here, further into this year and things aren't really moving, but things are moving. I just understand now, based on all the time we spent watching him in the first administration, what he's up against. I think he surrounded himself with better people. I just want to see how this plays out before I start trashing him for not doing this, that, or the other thing. Yeah. I just feel like he needs a little bit more time. This thing is a friggin' mess, Frank.
Yeah. And it's I know. you got to take some wins with some losses, and you got to, I'm just hoping for some domestic whatever.
I am too. And I know you would love, we've talked about the tax thing, I mean, a good compromise or a starting place would be no taxes for anybody who makes under $150,000. That would be wonderful.
I saw that.
Yeah, that would be wonderful.
I saw that floated out there. Somebody told me it was the Treasury Secretary. I don't know who it was.
Scott Bassett, I think. Yeah.
No, then it wasn't him. It was somebody else.
Okay.
I got it, but I didn't know who he was.
Yeah.
But I just had his the clip played, and somebody told me afterwards who he was. But either way, yeah, we'll see. Yeah. We will see, because it's all whether we're talking JFK or whether we're talking just the day-to-day grind, living under the constant pressure of these absolute animals.
Yeah.
And their minions, who are every day justifying violence in more more irrational ways. The fact that they're flying that kite is really, really crazy. But here's something else that's crazy. I want to talk about the Great Pyramid for a second. No, actually, it's just Giza in general, because this might be underneath all the pyramids. You just don't know.
Okay.
So here is what happened. There have been some pretty big news from Egypt. It's being contested by some. Apparently, there's more data coming out, and it concerns the ever enigmatic pyramids. So before we go into what happened last night, I'm just going to play 4.5 minutes of a Graham Hancock clip that I always loved, that just shows what the surface level, the pyramids from the surface up, how incredible they are, and the kind of questions that they have begged over the years. Yeah. So take a listen to this. This is about 4 minutes just to set the stage, and then we're going to go subterranean.
How do I think the pyramids were built? To be honest, I have no answer to that question. And anybody who tells you that he or she knows how the pyramids were built are not telling the truth, because we don't know. We don't know. The Great Pyramid contains a number of mysteries. The Great Pyramid, first of all, is very big. The Great Pyramid weighs 6 million tons. We can calculate that from its mass. It weighs 6 million tons. Its footprint is 13 acres. It's more than 750 feet along each side. It's 481 feet tall. More than 2.5 million individual blocks of stone were used in its construction. But it's not just big. It's really, really precise. The Great Pyramid is locked in to the cardinal dimensions of our planet. The Great Pyramid is targeted on true north, within 3/60ths of a single degree. Now, no modern builder would create a large building and add onto his or her shoulders the additional burden of aligning it to true north within a fraction of a single degree. They just wouldn't get it. They wouldn't understand why it was important to do that. But something drove the builders of the Great Pyramid to go to a very great additional trouble, not only to create this massive, imposing monument, but also to lock it on to true north. And then other things, to incorporate into its dimensions the dimensions of our planet. I don't want to get too numerical or possibly even boring here, but if you take the height of the Great Pyramid and multiply it by 43,200, you get the polar radius of the Earth. And if you measure the base perimeter of the Great Pyramid accurately and multiply that measurement by 43,200, you get the equatorial circumference of the Earth. In other words, for thousands of years, through times, through dark ages, when human beings didn't even know they lived on a planet, never mind its dimensions, that monument has encoded and speaks out the dimensions of our planet on a scale of 1 to 43,200. And the scale is not random. The number 43,200 is derived from a key motion of the Earth, which is called the precession of the Earth's axis. The Earth wobbles on its axis very slowly at the rate of 1 degree every 72 years. And 43,200 is a multiple of 72. In fact, I think it's 600 times 72, but I need to double check that. But it's a multiple of 72. Check it out. So they've given us the dimensions of our planet on a scale defined by the planet itself. And that's an incredibly clever thing to do. how on earth did they do it? Where did that knowledge come from? This is why I'm forced to consider the possibility of a lost civilization in the human story. This is a work of almost, but not quite, space-age precision. It contains errors, but they are human errors for sure, but they're very tiny. The great precision, great skill, great craft. Some people will say to you, oh, the Great Pyramid was built by slaves. That is utter bullshit. No slaves were ever involved in the construction of the Great Pyramid. As far as I know, there were no slaves in Old Kingdom Egypt whatsoever. The Great Pyramid, I've climbed it 5 times. I've been in every known chamber in the Great Pyramid. It is a work of stunning artistic achievement. You're looking at the work of masters of architecture at the peak of their skill, not an unwilling labor force, but people who gave their labor to that work with love and with care and with attention. There are blocks of stone weighing 70 tons that have been raised more than 300 feet above the ground. And we're not talking a couple of blocks, we're talking dozens of blocks of that weight. The average block weighs about 2.5 tons. It's the moving of those huge blocks of stone, their arrangement into a high precision monument, and the achievement of actually doing it, because you know, if you make a small mistake at the base, by the time you get to the summit of your 481 foot high pyramid, you don't have a pyramid, you have a corkscrew. Yeah. They got it all right, and nobody today can explain how they did it with the knowledge that is supposed to have been available in ancient Egypt in the Old Kingdom, and with the tools that are supposed to have been available. And that's why I can't help feeling that we are missing some chapter from the human story.
And that's a famous 4.5 minutes.
That is super cool.
Yeah, it makes you think.
I grabbed those statistics when you said you were going to do this, just because I thought that was fascinating. And the statistics about measuring the height by 43,200, those are accurate to within 99% plus, which is pretty incredible. And that 43,000 seconds, that 43,200 number also is the length of the day and night on the equinox. That's how long the day is, 42,200 seconds.
That's today.
Is that today?
Yeah, today's the spring equinox.
Well,
it's the first day of spring.
Oh, look at that.
Well, look at that. We couldn't have calculated that.
Yeah.
Oh,
so
man.
I thought that was really cool. And the other thing is that's really interesting about this, and I'm sure you're going to, maybe I'll hold it because I want to see where you're going to go next.
Okay, well, the next thing is just what came out, published on the 16th.
Let's do it.
And it got picked up by Jay Anderson. This guy, Jay Anderson, and I watched all of that, and that came out he did very well, obviously. And then I saw that Greg Reese picked it up and did, compiled a lot of the information that was in this thing here too. And essentially what it comes down to, and we're going to play Greg Reese's it's essentially the same length as the Graham Hancock one. So I just wanted to go to the more brief version. And what it's going to talk to you about is that there is a new kind. Some people are even contesting that, whether the technology is new or if it's just being done in this it's being rolled out in this new way. But it's almost like aerial X-ray satellite imaging kind of situation where you're coming from the up high down to the ground, and through certain types of resonance-based detection, like it almost like works to create images based on vibration more so than what you can just photograph in an X-ray kind of way. So you can get deeper and you can actually see caverns and map inner floor work, whatever the hell it is. He's going to explain it, but essentially they have examined the areas around these pyramids, and they found something that is so massive that if it is confirmed to be what they are proposing it is, you're going to see it is obviously beyond world changing. And yeah, take a look at this. This is from Greg Reese.
Corrado Malanga from the University of Pisa and Filippo Biondi, involved in radar and remote sensing research with the University of Strathclyde, published peer-reviewed research in 2022 via MDPI entitled Synthetic Aperture Radar Doppler Tomography Reveals Details of Undiscovered High-Resolution Internal Structure of the Great Pyramid of Giza. Their research was conducted using SAR data, synthetic aperture radar, along with proprietary software developed by Filippo Biondi, that transforms the radar signals into phononic information, which allows for the detection of millimetric vibrations. This cutting-edge technology is capable of revealing underground structures invisible to traditional methods, and revealed internal structures never seen before. Having established their expertise in using SAR to explore pyramid structures non-invasively, a recent press release on their current project was released last Saturday. This March 15th press release summarized the key findings in the team's research of the second largest pyramid of the Giza Plateau, known as the Khafre Pyramid, and what they found was astonishing. The analysis of dozens of tomographic SAR images obtained from different angles enabled the 3D reconstruction of inside the pyramid of Khafre and deep beneath the surface of the plateau. Near the base of the pyramid, 5 identical structures are seen, connected by geometric pathways. Inside each of these are 5 horizontal levels and a sloping roof. Below these 5 structures are 8 cylindrical structures, which appear to be vertical wells, hollow inside, and surrounded by descending spiral pathways. These 8 vertically aligned cylindrical structures, arranged in 2 parallel rows from north to south, descend to a depth of 648 meters, where they all merge into 2 large cubic structures, measuring approximately 80 meters per side.
Dude.
The entire structure extends approximately 2 kilometers beneath the surface and extends beneath all 3 pyramids of the Giza Plateau complex. Mainstream Egyptology tells us that the Giza pyramids were tombs for pharaohs Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure, and that they were built around 2500 BC using ramps, sledges, and levers. But the redundant mathematics in their construction, which include pi, the golden ratio, and the speed of light, along with the testimony of today's expert architects, suggests that the official story does not hold up. The massive underground structure revealed by the recent SAR data shows what appears to be a mechanical or functional system, and this has been hypothesized in the past. Nikola Tesla believed that the pyramids could harness Earth's natural frequencies. This arguably inspired his experiments in wireless energy transmission and scalar waves. In the Giza power plant, Christopher Dunn argued that the Great Pyramid was a power-generating machine using resonant and acoustic forces to convert mechanical stress into electricity. In the Giza Death Star, Joseph Farrell proposed that the Great Pyramid of Giza was a weapon of mass destruction using a type of physics that he calls paleophysics to focus energy as a scalar weapon. The cylindrical wells could be conduits for energy or sound waves, and the cubic structures might serve as energy storage or stabilization units, akin to components in a large-scale weapon or generator. And the detection of vibrations in the pyramid's internal structures reflects all of these ideas. The Khafre project hopes to plan an excavation in order to discover more about this underground structure, but history shows that this will be very difficult to get approval for. Greg Reese reporting.
So, okay. Now,
Yeah.
I mean, we've done, I think we've done 2. I know we've done the star clock. We've done a star clock, whether or not the pyramids were a star clock. What the hell's the other one over here? There's another one that was written by John Carroll on the blog on quitefrankly.tv. There it is right there. Divine Precision and the Mystery of Creation. This is from May of 2022.
Mm-hmm.
Really, really great stuff. Of course, this is,
Yeah.
I mean, there's so much on this topic as it is. Now, whatever it is, and also I went and looked into it. What's that that building in Abu Dhabi or whatever it is? The Khalifa, Burj Khalifa.
I'm not sure.
It's the biggest thing in the world.
Yeah.
It's out there in the Middle East.
Yeah.
Anyway, I said, okay, wow, okay, because obviously we Americans in the metric system and all that stuff, like kilometers, 2 kilometers, huh? What the hell are we talking about here? 2 kilometers deep. And I said, "What's the tallest building in the world?" I said, "I knew it was the one in the Middle East, and that only comes out to 0.8 kilometers long." Whoa. So I'm thinking about what they're saying is something that goes down, that structure, some kind of what they're, guessing at this. Well, I don't know if there's ever going to be consensus on this, because there's never consensus on anything that challenges mainstream, especially archaeology, everything else. Because once you start going back to things like this, whatever the hell it is, more than double the size. If this is really what they're saying it is, and it's not just some radar glitch, that it is, for example, the PCR test. We leaned really, really hard on the PCR test to let us know what was going on in 2020. And meanwhile, the people who created the PCR test said, "Hey, you're using it wrong, and this is not real."
Yeah.
Okay, you're creating the image of something that's not real. They had the cycles up real quick. Papaya fruit in Africa was testing positive.
Soda cans.
Yeah. Seriously. So whatever, we'll just to sit back and watch everybody duke this one out. What data is real, and is the imaging here legitimate? Because if this is real and not just some glitch, I could safely bet my savings that it wasn't human.
Yeah.
Or I don't know, whatever the hell even that means.
I thought it was really cool that he mentioned Tesla, because that's the principle when I think about this, and the bit of research I've done on Tesla, and especially the Wardenclyffe Tower, right? That seems to simulate something like that, capturing the resonance from the earth, because I believe that didn't mention it, but I thought I remember reading somewhere that both were built on aquifers, the pyramids and the Wardenclyffe Tower. Both were built on aquifers using the resonance of the earth, like the movement of the water allows the earth to resonate, and then that and I also believe, so I'm just putting like disparate pieces together, but I also remember reading about the pyramid having some sort of like chemical reaction, something, I think hydrochloric acid and zinc chloride were two chemicals that make hydrogen gas. And I believe remnants of both of those were found in the north and south passages of the Queen's Chamber. Like, I'm just like remembering, because I love Egyptology, I always did. But this is super interesting. I mean, and you're right. If we're talking about that kind of precision with that kind of just raw, raw construction power, I just don't see how, and to mention the fact that not one mummy has ever been found in a pyramid ever. So the fact that it was sold to us and to me when I was a kid as like tombs for mummies, that's kind of weird that they never had any evidence. And the fact that everyone who's ever been inside says it's quite unimpressive in terms of its like beauty compared to other things in ancient Egypt. There's no hieroglyphics. There's nothing. It's eerily mechanical. And here's the other really cool thing. If you're talking about focusing energy, the one thing I do remember for sure is the outside is built with a certain kind of limestone that was quarried like hundreds of miles away from the site of the building. But it was a limestone that lacked magnesium. And I think it's named after the place it was quarried. It's like Tora limestone or something, and it lacks magnesium, which means it's not conductive. So that was the white covering that was once upon a time on the outside of it, which means the pyramid was insulated. The inside of the pyramid, if I'm remembering all my readings correctly, was made mostly out of a granite that was extremely high in quartz, which is conductive. Very
conductive. And not only that, but we were talking about the different tones. When we broke open the topic of somatics and being able to use resonant frequency and all that stuff, that certain chambers were actually tuned to certain frequencies.
Yes.
So, and it was made you wonder, what could that have been? And of course, if there was a power source, what was it?
Yeah.
And I don't know, man.
Why would you go to the trouble of hauling those stones that were specifically, I mean, again, you've created like an ancient wire, right? Insulated on the outside, conductive on the inside. I mean, that's fascinating. And when you combine all those things together, how many coincidences have to occur before you start to think at least, or allow yourself to entertain the notion that it's not what it was purported to be and not what it was taught in my, ancient history classes in college and whatever. I mean, it's fascinating to me. And I know you're familiar with the channel, The Y Files. That guy, AJ, I think he's an actual Mensa member. The guy's brilliant, but he's also super talented. He does a whole thing on the pyramids and Tesla and combines them all together. And he uses some of Graham Hancock's work because I think he's a fan of Graham Hancock, but they do a specific like 25-minute video on that, which is incredibly informative. I remember, I think I saw that like a year ago or something. And that's what started me reading a little bit about it. Cause I just never been exposed to that kind of stuff. I always thought, whatever was taught to me was the way it was. And it's only Graham Hancock was the one who started to unravel that for me. So I always give him a ton of credit because he's just fascinating.
Yeah, I know. It's the same thing with me, and I love the Y Files as well. Yeah, and again, I've seen a lot of people say, "Hey, listen, hold your horses on this," because the radar methods that were being used to bring all this to light and inform these kind of images from underground, it's not what it seems, but I don't know. There just seems to be a lot of really. But interesting buzz around it.
Absolutely. And even if that's not true, the rest of what I just described to you is true. There is a resonant frequency to the pyramid. It is built in an insulated type manner. There are residues of hydrochloric acid and zinc chloride, which form hydrogen gas. There is a component there that is unmistakable. And why in the world would that be there in a simple tomb with no hieroglyphics and no artwork?
But I'll say something else. You know the movie Elf?
Sure.
Okay.
Like
Christmas.
Will Ferrell? Elf?
Christmas. Yeah, Will Ferrell.
Yeah.
Ed Asner.
Yeah.
The Ed Asner movie when he's Santa Claus. Well, in Elf, Santa Claus has to use a rocket because the old sled used to run solely on Christmas cheer. Remember that?
Yeah.
And all the cheer in the world was gone.
Yeah.
Well, I really believe that when we talk about what high civilization and high technology in the ancient world, especially if we're talking about theories that circle around lost civilizations go, I really do believe that too many people get hung up and fixated on wires and microprocessing units and the world we live in right now where every cheap toy contains a circuit board inside of it, And that may right there be a barrier to understanding how ancient high technology may have been far more renewable and drew directly from the earth, closer to what Michio Kaku would have defined as being a type 1 civilization.
Yeah.
According to Michio Kaku and what he's been saying since the 90s, we're still a type 0 civilization. We haven't even harnessed the power of our planet. And then type 2 is harnessing the power of our native star, and then type 3 is the galactic. What are you doing with the energy from the galaxy? So if this was a battery of some sort, it probably wasn't engaging some giant turbine or whatever. It might look crude, or whoever the hell knows. Maybe the fuel source was, like you said, you're talking about aquifers. Maybe the fuel source was the salt water from the Nile. Yeah. You just don't know. I mean, there's been plenty of water theories with the whole region, how that used to be lush jungle and everything else. And
I think the Sphinx has a very specific kind of erosion that only seems to have been if there was a specific amount of water in that area, I believe. Right. It's different than the other area. Yeah.
Well, that goes into a lot of flood theories too.
Right. Yeah.
A lot of flood theories. In fact, the remaining capstone of whatever capstone, I think it might be on Khafre's. Mm-hmm. I think that's the one that still has a little bit of
I forget which one.
Limestone up top, or whatever.
Yeah.
I don't know. That's what people said. It was a high water mark at one point.
Yeah.
So who knows? Who knows? But if you get all your news from in history from Mr. Beast. Because I remember we were looking at me, Lauren, and Aurora were on the couch a couple of weeks ago, and we just got home we went out to dinner on a Saturday night, and we still had a little bit of time. We said, let's stay up a little bit. Let's watch something on the television together. So we pulled up YouTube, and we were just looking for science experiments and funny videos and all that stuff, and we stumbled upon this. The first time I ever watched Mr. Beast.
I've never seen a Mr. Beast video.
I know all the references.
Yeah.
So we saw an obstacle course that he did with some friend that was like 200 feet up in the air. So we watched this video, and then the next suggested video was Mr. Beast goes to Egypt. And he was brought into all the, this, nobody's ever been in here before, Mr. Beast. And I'm saying to myself, because these are people who are approved, state approved tour guides that are taking him, knowing that this guy is being watched by hundreds of millions of kids, and everything along the way was about this was a tomb for one pharaoh or another.
Yeah.
And it is so like state run media.
Yeah.
But they have to deal with that. I always wonder what like everyday Egyptians think, because it's one thing you think about how we say, don't fucking listen to our government, please.
Right.
I would love to know what everyday Egyptians think about these things that are right in their backyard. I would love to hear that.
I'm not doing this intentionally unless you want to do it because it's your show. But a perfect analogy to that in this country is if you go to Dallas, Texas, and you go to Dealey Plaza and you go to the 6th floor museum that's created on the 6th floor of the Texas School Book Depository, it is all Warren Commission government BS. That whole museum is dedicated to 3 shots fired by Lee Harvey Oswald from that position. Everything else is a conspiracy. End of story. So if you were to go there and say, let's experience this, what do the rest of Americans think? Most Americans think it was an actual conspiracy. But the official museum at the place tells you something different. So just another little, indication that you're right. So, and that makes you, of course, wonder about someone like Mr. Beast. Again, I wouldn't know that guy if I fell over him. I don't even know what he looks like. I've never watched a video, but something tells me that he doesn't gain access unless he's going to portray it the way it's supposed to be portrayed, or he himself is just controlled and is just part of the machine that disseminates the BS information. I don't think one or the other.
Yeah, I think that again, I don't know too much about him either.
Yeah,
but from what I was watching with the way that the channel is produced and how it has obviously been grown, I don't know. Perhaps he has a lot of creative control of what's going on there, but I don't think he's a really deep thinker.
Yeah. Again, I don't know him from a hole in the wall, so maybe not. And he just might be happy to swallow everything hook, line, and sinker in exchange for access. And again, people use those platforms. Either they create them with the perception, because we know the astroturfing happens online all the time, right? The accounts with all these millions of followers, and really they're just kind of created out of thin air, or they capitalize on organic content and someone who doesn't really have an opinion on most things, and they just sort of nudge them in a certain direction. I mean, that's an effective way to get your message out there, especially if you know that 7 people watch Rachel Maddow now.
Right.
And that, and no one's watching CNN. It's like those mediums are dead. And I think the people and the powers that be who want to put out a message understand the best way to do it is like that.
Right. MSNBC and CNN are essentially somebody's write-off at this point.
Totally.
I don't
even think airports play them anymore.
Yeah, I gotta write something off. Let's buy a network. Everybody always say there's always somebody saying, there's actually some great financial incentive for having some sort of a piece of property that really is not occupied and just sits. The vacancy alone, it's a really effective write-off in some parts. A friend of mine was talking about that with a lot of vacant shops up in Peekskill and things like that.
Yeah.
But one thing I do wish, because you gave us a perfect segue to go into JFK, what I do wish is that we had a little bit more validation for remote viewers from over the years. I know that there is, Edgar Cayce spoke a little bit about a Hall of Records under the Sphinx. I don't know who the hell else.
Ingo Swann, he was one of the really famous ones, right?
Yeah,
I think he remote viewed the rings on Jupiter before we ever knew that Jupiter had had a ring.
But people would I think mostly remote view the Sphinx, and nobody was, and I never heard anything about. It would be awesome if somebody had said, "Hey, you know what? There is a massive 2 to 3 kilometer gargantuan Prometheus kind of machine underneath that would have been a very big feather in the cap for."
There was a woman who, this wasn't remote viewing, but who claimed, this is another Y-Files episode. Sorry, I didn't mean to do this, but it's a good show that delves into a lot of interesting territory. A woman who claimed to be an Egyptian reincarnated, like as a little girl, and she literally knew things about Egypt she couldn't possibly have known. And she said there was a library under the Sphinx, and and this was well before it was ever discovered. And then years later, it was found that there actually was one there. She said she was a resident of Abydos, and she had a really troubled childhood, and she said she never felt at home. And then one day her parents took her to a museum. She fell in love with the Egyptian relics and felt like she was home. And she ended up literally moving there and ended up dying there. Like that was her, I think she died in like the 80s, but she lived her whole life there, and she became a true Egyptologist. And even professional Egyptologists were remarkably impressed and couldn't explain how and why she knew the things she knew. There's no reason she should have known those things.
Right.
She claimed that she lived there in ancient Egypt. It was fascinating. But anyway, similar to that.
Yeah. Well, I just went to, while you were saying that, I was listening, and I also went to just go double check a few things with Edgar Cayce.
Mm-hmm.
Casey's most famous assertion is the existence of a hall of records beneath the Great Sphinx at Giza. He claimed this subterranean library was constructed by survivors of the lost civilization of Atlantis around 10,500 BC to preserve their knowledge before their continent's destruction. According to Cayce, the hall of records lies between the Sphinx and the Nile River, with an entrance near the Sphinx's right paw. In some readings, he described it as a pyramid-shaped chamber. And yeah, I don't know. Here's some remote viewers and psychics. H. Spencer Lewis and Rosicrucian claims. In 1930s, Lewis, a leader in the ancient and mystical order of the Rosicrucians, claimed that beneath the Giza Plateau lies a network of subterranean passages and temples. I don't know, but 2 kilometers is just, we're talking that's just huge. That's why that even gives me pause.
Yeah.
Where I'm just like, okay, well, I'm going to wait to see what next tranche of data comes out and watch everybody duke it out a little bit. Because at this point, I can tell, just watching enough of Joe Rogan, when someone like Graham Hancock and Randall Carlson go on, and they have some tightwad pencil neck fuck that calls in and to just kind of like challenge them, and you can just watch a person act in complete bad faith with an argument, and you're like, oh, this guy's a fucking shill, you know. So I like watching people duke it out now, because I hope I can smell shills a little bit easier these days.
I feel like it's a little bit easier.
It's a little bit easier because they lose their shit because they're the establishment. They're stumping for the establishment.
I just don't understand. I don't understand the mentality, Frank, because again, if I go into my field, I welcome advancements in scientific understanding and knowledge. I say it all the time. I mean, if it wasn't for that, we were making moves in the health sciences field before we even understood that the body had certain hormones that even existed. So how can you be so naive to think that you have all the answers already? I will never be that person. I don't want to be that person. I don't aspire to be that person. And those kind of people shock me, because I just think, where's your curiosity, and what's the point of living if you don't have that curiosity? I'm a forever student, and I'm always happy to have these conversations. Like we kind of talked about a little bit off. Frank and I had our own little private podcast before the show started. And I just think curiosity is at the root of all this. And it's what makes people so unique. Our curiosity should be endless. And, to some degree, I wonder if that's being intentionally legislated out of us so that we just kind of roll over and take it.
Yeah.
It's not about being right. It's just about being curious.
Where I started realizing, I would say where it hit a little bit more close to home was when we released this last bulletin from March. And in the March bulletin, we had this really great piece from Michael Collins that was in there, and just talking about Göbekli Tepe.
Oh, yeah.
And what's going on out there. I said, listen, whenever you come on, whether you're coming on alone or if we can get other people to come on with you, we had a couple of names we're trying to float out there. And apparently he's pretty, he's in contact with Graham Hancock, because Graham Hancock shared his article from our...
Oh, yeah, I remember that.
Yeah. But once Graham Hancock shared that article from our bulletin, I just paid attention to the comments. And man, as for the people, hey, Mike, congratulations, Michael. People coming after him, and I go to their bios, clicking through archaeologist, paleontologist, whatever,
Yeah.
and I said, "Damn." So you want to talk about the infighting everywhere? I mean, it's like that's when you can tell that something has reached religious status for someone. When you can say, no, we already know everything that there is to know about this.
I mean, it's such a preposterous point of view. The ego. I mean, you're no better or different than Bill Gates, who thinks blocking out the sun is perfectly reasonable and there can't possibly be a downside because Bill Gates understands everything about astrophysics, geology, everything. He's got it all figured out. Blocking the sun, not going to be a problem. Stop being a conspiracy theorist baby. That you're putting yourself in a category you don't want to be in and you don't even realize it.
Yeah.
It's really remarkable when people do that kind of stuff. And I think I shared this with you real quick one time. A friend of mine was used to sharing my stuff. Somebody I actually went to school with. And she said to me in a private DM, and I won't name her, but I'll share the message because I thought it was shocking and remarkable that she said, every time I share one of your posts or your writings or anything, we get messages from either doctors or from government officials telling us not to share your stuff. I was like, whoa. I mean, I am not high on the totem pole. I'm just a regular guy. And I pressed her a little bit and I was like, really? I mean, and she just said, well, it tells me that you're over the target. This is like a duo that has like a company and everything. And maybe they may have some followers that are a little bit more like she's got people in the military and stuff. So they may have a different follower base than I do and larger. But anytime she shares anything, she's like, in our DMs, we get doctors. And she said government officials. Now, I'm not saying it's like high government official. It could just be somebody who works for whatever, the FDA, whatever, somebody.
Yeah.
That say not to share my stuff and why, like just your basic conspiracy theory stuff. And I'm like, wow. And all my stuff is like cited. I usually even put the paper in the story. So when I write on Instagram, I write about a paper and I put the paper in the story. So when people go, I want to see that paper, I'm like, go to my story. Every day you'll notice that theme. You read something I write, you'll see the paper in the story. Or if it's on Rumble, I'm showing you the paper on screen. So it's not like I'm just making stuff up. But she said they always come into our DMs and say, you shouldn't share that guy's stuff. It's like, wow. Yeah. Like even little old me gets that kind of pushback.
Oh, you're on a list. You're on a list.
I said that to her. I'm like, damn it.
I know.
So whatever. It is what it is.
Well, hey, just keep walking the walk, man.
Exactly, man. I don't know any other way to be. Whatever.
Well, listen here. This is what we're going to do. I'm going to skip the intermission.
Okay.
Because I just don't want to waste any time at this point. I want to get to the JFK thing, and hopefully we can take some calls. But what I will say right now is I have a birthday, a very big birthday that's coming up in 2 weeks. On April 2nd, I'll be turning 40. And, well, you know what? If life begins at conception, I've already been 40 for a long time.
That's true.
Yes.
That's true.
So I will just say
40's the new 20. Anyway.
I know. My arrival day. The anniversary of my arrival is coming up. And what I will say is this. If you enjoy this show, I hope to be doing this for another 40 years, as long as I don't have that old man cotton mouth. If I start having the
Chuck Schumer,
if I have the Chuck Schumer cotton mouth, that is when I will go to writing books instead of doing radio. But I will say this: become a sponsor of the show. We do for the hundreds of episodes we do a year. It is many thousands of hours of love put into the preparation of each one. Mm-hmm. And I always hope that they're all home runs. We do the best we can, but I just become a sponsor of the show, and even if it's just for a little bit. And that is all can be found on quitefrankly.tv, the sponsor us tab, and there's so many things to do. You can just generally, there's a wonderful list of universal perks you get, all the exclusive culture clubs, which is the film club and the book club, and then of course there's the Sunday streams and so much more that's going on. We have great sponsors. We're always giving stuff away, and just be a part of it. And it takes as little as $5 a month, and you can also go to the specialty sponsorships on Patreon and Subscribestar, where you can become a pen pal of mine, or you can get a monthly postcard or a monthly Polaroid and all this fun shit. We set it up so that it is just, I'm giving back and always trying to create more value for you. And, but there's also something you can do for me right now. And that is you can like the show, you can share it, comment on it if you are watching it after the fact. If you're watching in the live chat, enjoy yourself. But when the show is done, just put a comment in there for the algorithm, and that would be wonderful. And if you listen on Spotify, even if you don't, if you have Spotify, look for the show on Spotify and subscribe to it and give it a 5-star review. We have about 500 reviews there about right now, and they're like 4.9 stars. If we can get 500 more 5-star reviews in or around the time I turned 40, that would be great.
I mean, man, and there's so
it's
many,
free,
and there's so much coming. Like we're not going to give anything away, but the more you support, the more we can do. And there's a lot of things that we talk about a lot that I think.
I can't wait to talk about.
There's things coming.
There's just some fun stuff coming, guys,
and in the very near future too, if it's possible. So it's worth it.
Yep. Okay. Well then, with that being said, let's open up a new can of worms.
Everyone is voting for Jack, 'cause he's got what all the rest lack. Everyone wants to back Jack. Jack is on the right track, 'cause he's got high hopes. He's got high hopes.
Yes, he does.
Who's that snake in the grass next to him?
Yeah, who's that jowly bastard? Hey, who's that jowly guy standing next to Jack Kennedy?
The rumor is they did not want him on the ticket.
But they needed Southerners, though.
That's the prevailing wisdom. But I'll tell you what it really is seems like J. Edgar Hoover had his clause in that, because there was some compromising material on JFK, and Hoover and Johnson were best friends. And so that's how we got in there. And apparently RFK Sr. was livid because him and Johnson hated each other. And that's like a public spat that has gone on forever. They hated each other. And apparently RFK went to JFK and said, "What are you doing?" And it's like, I really have no choice here.
I have no choice.
Yep. That's the strong arm.
They know about me and so-and-so.
Uh-huh.
And this is another reason why he was so expendable. They thought that, hey, we have a nicely controlled guy who's going to come in here and put a northeastern smile on everything and just sign some papers, and hopefully we get on through. And when you show that you have any level of autonomy, like I said, not a perfect presidency, not a perfect person.
Nope.
I mean, there's a lot of people who say he and Johnson might be two of the most morally repugnant people that have ever been in the White House. With the that's what I heard from everybody.
Mm-hmm.
Say, hey, we can talk about what his death meant as far as a turning point for the country and how we operate as a country, how the presidency was captured. Well, the real test of whether or not you're going to be able to fulfill promises that you gave the American people. So it is not a high watermark, but it's a benchmark.
Yeah.
And that's what we have going on right now. Now, as far as what's been released, we were told that there's about 80,000 pages.
Right.
I think up until this point, there's somewhere between 40 and 60,000 that's out.
Mm-hmm.
I think as of yesterday, this is what WorldNet Daily put out. Deep State sees some of the charges uncovered in the newly released JFK assassination files. There are about 2,182 PDF documents with more than 63,000 pages. So apparently there's going to be nearly 20,000 more pages that comes out.
Yeah.
I don't know what's been released today. Tulsi Gabbard is going to be the one that would make those announcements.
Yeah, she had released a statement on March 18th that they were still literally in the process of scanning and digitizing certain documents, and that she said she'll have updates on X and Truth Social as files are released. So they're still coming.
Well, here's a little bit what we got. Okay. There's a claim from a top CIA agent who said that the deep state was responsible. The allegation that the Secret Service was warned 3 months before the murder of the plot, and the documents still contain redactions and ambiguities. A report confirmed that former U.S. Army captain and CIA informant John Garrett Underhill, Jr., quote, the day after the assassination, Gary Underhill left Washington in a hurry. Late in the evening, he showed up at the home of a friend in New Jersey. He was very agitated. A small clique within the CIA was responsible for the assassination, he confided, and he was afraid for his life and probably would have to leave the country. Less than 6 months later, Underhill was found shot to death in his Washington apartment. The coroner ruled it a suicide. Daily Mail reported Larry J. Sabato, director of the University of Virginia Center for Politics, author of the Kennedy Half Century, said that he had a team that started going through the documents, but it may be some time before their full significance becomes clear. We have a lot of work to do for a long time to come, and people just have to accept that, he said.
That's the thing I think that...
The books are going to be great to read.
Yeah, and that's the message that's, I really wanted to caution people because, of course, everyone wants like the document, but there's no such thing. It's like, it's a series of putting together small pieces. And as the perfect example of that is in 2017, when more was declassified, we learned that everybody knows that Kennedy fired Allen Dulles, the head of the CIA. And then Allen Dulles was later appointed to head the Warren Commission to investigate the assassination of the man who fired him from the CIA, right? No conflict of interest there.
None.
But what people don't realize is that in 2017, there was speculation, but then we got confirmation that there was also a man by the name of Charles Cabell. He was the deputy director. He was also either forced to resign or fired by Kennedy. His brother, Earl Cabell, was the mayor of Dallas and set the parade route the day that Kennedy was assassinated. And he was also a CIA asset. And we learned that for sure in 2017. So those are the kinds of things that you're going to discover. And there's some great articles on there, but like it was speculated for a long time. And then when the documents were released, that's what we learned there. So, the brother of a guy who was fired by John F. Kennedy ran the city of Dallas and created the motorcade route that took him right down and violated virtually every Secret Service policy possible, slowing the motorcade down to an obscene place where anybody from a window in an office building could take shots. People don't realize also that same month in November of 1963, there were two other foiled assassination attempts in Chicago. Kennedy's trip was actually canceled in Chicago because somebody was actually was arrested in Chicago, and the plot, Frank, was almost identical. Former Marine in an office building, really weird. And so they used some cover story as to why Kennedy canceled that trip, but it turns out that I can't remember the name of the Secret Service agent. It was the first black Secret Service agent, Bolden, Abraham Bolden. I think his first name was Abraham.
Well, this is why I brought you on tonight.
Yeah. See, man, we're going to have a lot of fun next Friday too, because like I said to you, I miss going through all this stuff. These names were like, I used to be able to rapid fire this stuff. And then I went to school for science and all that stuff had to get replaced.
Yeah.
But I used to be able to just fire this kind of stuff off because I love it. I just loved it since high school. But anyway, people don't realize that stuff. That there were two assassination attempts or plots that were uncovered by the Secret Service, supposedly, that same month. So he was not getting out of 1963
See, what
alive.
you're talking about there too, yeah, that's a great way of saying it.
Yeah.
And it was essentially a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
November 22nd was a shooting gallery.
Yeah.
And I was just, the one thing we were never going to get was, and then Agent so-and-so, who was driving the car, turned around and delivered the kill shot.
Right.
He has since been placed on leave.
Right.
And then, when all the Cuban sharpshooters missed their marks, Woody Harrelson's father finished the president off from the sewer.
Right, yeah. It's just, even if any of those things were true, that's not going to be in the document.
No.
You're going to be forced to do like a lot of critical thinking.
It's deduction.
Yes.
So it's going to be a lot of, and as you were saying before, when it even comes down to Allen Dulles and, the fact that he was anywhere near the Warren Commission is hilarious.
Ridiculous.
But when you start learning about brothers that were in charge of picking parade routes and all that stuff, is like you can deduce so much, and then you have once again you have to just put that through the filter of, do you trust government? And if you do or don't, then you are going to be seeing just a remarkable comedy of errors that resulted in a very tragic death of, at that time, a pretty beloved American president. And if you don't trust the government, then you see what is an obvious setup.
Yeah.
And that's the whole thing here. Confirmation, versus disclosure. And where there's things being disclosed right now that really do give a lot of texture to things that seem to be pretty obvious, but who the hell is ever going to preserve the records to tell us you're 100% right? There's a lot of people feeling a lot more validated now.
Yeah.
But, that's just where we're going to be.
Yeah. And I mean, we can balance this, between now and next Friday. I mean, I would love to talk about certain things because I think the disclosures are valuable. I understand the frustration. Nobody's more frustrated than I am that there's so many documents to go through and people feel like it's a distraction. And I'm like, oh, well, I mean, I guess if you believe everything is a distraction, then they've won because now you don't even know what to believe at all. But all I can tell you is that there have been valuable and validating pieces of evidence that have been released, even going back to the Assassinations Record Review Board in 1999. Things that have made, Frank, things that have made it impossible to believe the official story. And in a sense, if you were to go to a court of law and say, my goal as the attorney for Lee Harvey Oswald is just to prove reasonable doubt, there's no way Lee Harvey Oswald would be convicted in a court of law. No way. So if that's the case, then you can proceed from there and say, well, then what other options are there or what is likely? But I can also tell you that not one person in Dealey Plaza saw the events unfold the way the Warren Commission says they unfolded. That's pretty weird. You don't even have one witness that saw Lee Harvey Oswald take 3 shots from the 6th floor school book depository. You don't even have one witness, not one. So it's kind of hard to even imagine with all those people that you couldn't find one person who could corroborate the Warren Commission. They cobbled a story out of a whole bunch of disparate facts and cherry-picked and left out witnesses that would contradict other witnesses or corroborate other witnesses that would fly in the face of the story. If you understand how the magic bullet theory was created, it's bizarre.
Is that when the bullet took the U-turn?
Yeah. Because what happened was an innocent bystander was hit by a fragment of a bullet that hit considerably up the road towards the underpass. And that's why they got locked into this 3 bullets thing, because we knew one hit him in the head and killed him. So that was indisputable. Okay, that's one bullet. But this other bullet, and by the way, the other reason is that there were 3 casings found on the 3rd floor. So 3 bullets. So you got to make 3 bullets do all this damage. Well, then they got this guy, James Tague, down at the underpass who gets hit by a fragment, and too much news coverage of this guy with a bullet that ricocheted off the curb, and they took the piece of the curb off with the bullet fragment, and he's got blood on his cheek. The news media was all over it. So the Warren Commission was kind of like, shit. So we've got the bullet in the head. We've got the bullet that hit James Tague. Now we're left with one bullet to cause everything else in John Connally and in John F. Kennedy. And that's where the magic bullet theory, they had no choice. Because people say, well, why didn't they just say 4 bullets or 5 bullets? And it's like, well, they found 3 casings and now they've got 2 wounds. So every other wound had to be this one crazy bullet. And
to think that it can go through the passenger in the front seat. What's his name again?
John Connally was directly in front.
He's
of
the governor. What was he?
The governor
of
Texas. Yeah,
he was the governor. It went through him, and then that was the explanation for the bullet through the throat.
Yes.
of Kennedy.
Yes,
it went through the
Same
governor
bullet.
and through his throat.
Yep, through Kennedy, through the back of Kennedy's head, the back of his neck, out his throat, and then into the back of John Connally's right shoulder blade. Then it hit his wrist. Then it turned around and embedded itself in his left thigh. That's what they're saying.
Oh my God.
Yeah.
See, I didn't realize that they were saying that. They said that the bullet passed through the back and came out the front.
Yeah.
So when he went like this, and what we see on the Zapruder tape.
Yeah, when he puts his hands up to his throat.
When he puts his hands up to his throat, which is the first time he gets struck.
In the Zapruder film, it's right after he passes through past the Stemmons freeway sign. There's a sign obstructing the view. As soon as the motorcade, because you could see prior to that, Kennedy's waving, he's fine. As soon as the motorcade comes back into view after that freeway sign, his hands are already up by his throat. So that shot came while he was behind the Stemmons freeway sign from the perspective of Zapruder.
Right.
And they're saying that bullet
came from the back
and caused all the damage. Now, here's another really cool thing. You can find plenty of autopsy evidence that showed the bullet was actually lower down in the back, and it had to be moved up front once they realized if the trajectory of the bullet was from up high to low, the bullet had to enter higher and exit lower through the throat. So if the bullet wound was somewhere in the mid back, that's not possible. The bullet couldn't enter the back and then come out the throat.
Right.
So guess who moved that wound on this guy was on the Warren Commission. He moved the wound, he said, to clarify things for the public. Now, again, the doctors at Parkland Hospital drew this picture of where the wound was, like they're supposed to do, tracing bullet wounds. So they put the wound, maybe a quarter of the way down the back, which would have made it impossible for it to come out the throat, given the trajectory being high to the rear. So guess who moved the bullet from the back to the back of the neck in order to allow that trajectory to continue and potentially validate the magic bullet theory?
Who?
Gerald Ford.
Oh.
Who later became the only unelected president of the United States of America.
Yeah, after they character assassinated his president. Yeah.
So I mean, that's another one of those interesting facts, and that's not even disputed. Gerald Ford is quoted as saying, "Oh, I moved that to just to make it a little bit clearer for the public." No, you altered evidence and created a completely different ballistic scenario that is quite literally impossible unless you make that move.
So wait, how many times was Kennedy hit?
Well, that's the thing. No one really knows. I mean, they're saying one in the back of the neck, through the throat, and then one in the head. So they're claiming he was hit twice. And one of the bullets that hit him in the back of the neck also did all the damage in Connally. I believe it's 7 wounds. 1 bullet, 7 wounds, I believe. 2 in Kennedy, 5 in Connally, I believe. Shattering ribs, shattering wrists, all these things. And by the way, I think it's Exhibit 399 in the Warren Commission. The bullet is relatively remarkably clean considering what it did.
I see. I wish I had, maybe for next Friday, what I can do is I can get some clips from Francis Connolly's JFK to 9/11 documentary.
Sure.
Just on the actual day at Dealey, because there was such a breakdown of the shots fired there that he actually goes as far as placing different shooters.
Yeah.
I think up to like 7.
Super interesting. And a couple of other great resources on this is if you haven't seen Destiny Betrayed, which is a more updated version of Oliver Stone's JFK with the guy's last name is Diogenio. I can't remember his first name, but Destiny Betrayed. It's like a 4-part series. I think it was on like Showtime or something. Fascinating because it actually goes into a lot of the history, but they go through all the ballistics. They use Cyril Wecht, who's a pathologist who traces all the wounds for everybody and explains the whole thing. It's called Destiny Betrayed. It's fantastic. That's something to see. And then another channel on YouTube that is amazing. A guy named, the channel's called America's Untold Stories. Mark Robert is the sort of JFK journalist that has done it his whole career. He's amazing. He goes through like all the individual players and talks about their backstories. That's really fascinating if you want to get into stuff that's not even necessarily connected to Dealey Plaza, but the sort of conspiracy and how and why we got where we got. Not just the ballistic evidence in the plaza that day, but all the backstory. America's Untold Stories, Mark Robert. He's a fantastic resource on that stuff too. He reads about it obsessively, I think, even more than I do. So those are some really, really good resources. Oh, and also the documentary, The Men Who Killed Kennedy. This was a British documentary, which I think it had some stuff that wasn't true, but it also had some really good interviews with people like the Undertaker, who like put together Oswald's body after the fact and said that the FBI visited him before the funeral in order to basically put Oswald's prints on the rifle because they didn't have any prints on the rifle prior to that. And he knows this because when he was preparing Oswald's body after the FBI left, he had to scrub off the black ink from the fingerprints that they had put on the. I mean, it's a crazy story. So, you know,
and that's the thing there too. You going into these documentaries and reading books, you almost need baseline education, because there is a lot that you pick up along the way that doesn't jive.
Right.
And like for example, that 9/11 to JFK to 9/11 Everything's a rich man's trick. I said it the other night. There's so much about it that I think is just fascinating and well done and worth pondering at least. But there's also a lot left out, and there's a lot of bias from the film creator on things like what the communist threat actually was and who was behind communism and all that stuff. So you just take things along the way. Of course, something that's in there that somebody like John Barber said no is complete fiction was something like the body switch myth. Right. You know what was done with Kennedy's body, because what you're telling the public, as you're saying before, how many bullet casings do we have? What's the trajectory of the shooter that we're talking about? How many times was he struck and where? I mean, the bullet wounds physically have got to match the description of what's going on. And hearing about this myth about switching, trying to make him and that Officer Tibbetts guy look the same, there's a lot,
and there's an awful lot of it's in some ways there's no need for it, because when they did the autopsy at Bethesda Naval Hospital, they had access to a ton of bodies, so it wouldn't even have necessarily been necessary. But I mean, I love to just entertain these things because it keeps my mind either, it keeps my brain plastic, in order to entertain something, but also solidify my own understanding of a situation in order to rule something out. Like, you just don't want to dismiss anything out of hand, even if it seems silly. I agree. The body switch has a ton of interesting factoids to it, but I just ultimately don't think it's necessary, but I think it's super interesting. Same thing with the driver, being the shooter. I know there's a whole bunch of people super passionate about that because William Cooper said he heard from somebody, but William Cooper could have been played, could have been wrong, but I entertained it, and I'm like, I just don't think that's the case, because no one in Dealey Plaza actually saw that happen, and they were all focused on the motorcade. So it just seems unreasonable to me. But I don't not entertain it, and it doesn't make me, a shill for the government if I don't believe that. I allow myself to entertain everything, and I think through all the possibilities.
Well, hold that thought, because one person who thinks you're an absolute moron?
Who?
Ben Shapiro. You have to listen.
Well, then we have something in common.
Blew my mind.
Bring it on, Ben.
Blew my mind. I think, with his smarmy little beard.
He really, he's a smarmy guy.
My God. I want you to listen to this, okay? Listen to this.
Sort of conspiracy theorizing that's become incredibly popular on the right these days. It was popular on the left, and now it's become increasingly popular on the right. The kind of, let's just ask questions. We'll ask who really killed JFK? Wink, wink, nod, nod. And then you're like, well, do you have any evidence of the thing that you are presupposing? Well, no, I'm not making any accusations. I just know I don't believe the story that I'm being told. I know not to trust the authorities. You're like, well, that's fine, but do you have any evidence? Like evidence, not just supposition. Well, you're part of it, aren't you? You're part of it. The reason that you're so defensive about all this is, I don't care who killed JFK. I mean, I do, because it's really interesting, but I noticed that the calendar says 2025 and he was killed in 1963. And so my opinion about who killed JFK has about as much relevance as who killed William McKinley, or James Garfield, which is to say not an enormous amount.
Can you believe, first of all, there's tons of evidence. And I know you could probably go on for another 3 hours on the evidence.
Mackerel. Wow.
But can you imagine the fucking balls it takes to say that the Kennedy assassination, as far as the trajectory this country was put on, the world was put on,
the Vietnam War alone.
To think that,
this guy's a disgrace.
Absolute disgrace. And listen, this is aside from the fact that he is a professional wet blanket and a stealer of joy, but this defies any and all reason. And you know what? If we can't talk about that, then I don't want to hear anything about any aspect of the Jewish Holocaust anymore, Ben, because the Holocaust has been used as a cudgel for steering domestic and international policy for generations now.
Absolutely.
Generations. And Kennedy was 20 years later, but the former is referenced daily to guilt people into one form of action over another. And regardless of what you feel about how, what the hell it is, what the line of the day is, 89 million people died in the Holocaust versus Kennedy was one person. Yeah, well, one person who was getting in the way of the start of Vietnam, which of course was this Afghanistan war prototype Gladio style war. the burgeoning nuclear and geopolitical interests of Israel, which actually pops up quite a surprisingly amount in these drops. I couldn't believe, everybody's like, oh, I wonder how much is going to be in there about Israel in particular. And I couldn't believe how much it pops up there.
And I was just going to say, and maybe Ben has an issue with JFK because JFK wasn't the biggest fan of the state of Israel either. He was trying to, I think he was one of the only presidents who didn't, do the ceremonial visit to Israel and was trying to actually prevent them from having nuclear capability.
Right. Didn't want nukes as threat. And
we know all Ben Shapiro's entire life is centered around the state of Israel. Everything has to be centered around that. But this is also coming from an absolute moron of Ben Shapiro, who believed everything about the COVID narrative, including everything about the juice, and never to this day has come out to say, I was wrong about that. Telling you were stupid for not taking the juice.
He would take that kind of line like Scott Adams did with saying, listen, you were right, but for the wrong reasons.
Yeah, right.
It's you being right is incidental.
Right.
That's the kind of ground that would be ceded by somebody like a Ben Shapiro. And like you were saying before, what we have seen for decades of research into this, but now also what's in these 60,000 or so pages so far is really it's a complex picture, multiple layers of a guy who was obviously going to be taken out because of a number of reasons that we said before. What the Vietnam War just meant to the shadow state as a prototype war for what we have now seen done in not only Southeast Asia, but what we've seen done in North Africa, throughout the Middle East, Central and South America, and of course that all started in Europe with the original Gladio. Mm-hmm. I mean, these drops over here too. That even includes the Vatican, the CIA. There's CIA portions of these notes in here talking about reaching out to their contacts and their assets in the Vatican, who is mentioned in some of these pages, like I said. But it's not surprising if you know anything about how the Vatican Bank was doing most of the banking for Operation Gladio, which is essentially laundering drug money.
Yeah. And
I don't know. I mean, and that goes beyond all the obvious stuff. Anti-Castro Cubans who are pissed off about Bay of Pigs.
Right.
La Cosa Nostra, who feel like they had been jilted because of all the deals that Joe Kennedy were striking.
Right.
I mean, it's so much, and of course the CIA is obviously the likely middleman to them all.
Yeah.
So
and people also forget that JFK, I mean, go read the Operation Northwoods document. John F. Kennedy was the only person that stood between us and Operation Northwoods. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were hankering for some kind of a war with either Cuba or, there's a lot of people who think that that's one of the reasons that LBJ gave them the war in Vietnam, because you have to remember, there's, I think it was Ted Sorensen, who was JFK's sort of like scribe. He just kind of like he was a speechwriter. He took a lot of notes just about meetings. He was in all the meetings. The Joint Chiefs of Staff were trying to push Kennedy towards a nuclear exchange with the Soviet Union. And they thought that Kennedy was soft on communism because he wanted to negotiate. What does that sound like today, right? Anytime Trump picks up the phone and tries to have diplomatic relations with Putin, he's some kind of he's a Putin puppet, right? Same tricks, different time. But if Kennedy was smart enough to realize no one's going to win in a nuclear exchange, and he sort of downplayed and vetoed Operation Northwoods, when LBJ took the reins, he wasn't dumb enough either to say, well, I'm not going to get into a nuclear exchange, but I'll give you a war. It's just not going to be with the Soviet Union. It's going to be in Vietnam. So, I mean, there are so many geopolitical aspects to this. And so for Ben Shapiro to not think that assassination was,
it's not relevant.
Yeah. And again, what I'll say is, Ben, you were dumb enough to believe everything about COVID, maybe because you don't understand fully the relevance of the Kennedy assassination. And maybe if you studied a little bit more history and did a little bit less bloviating about things and have a little bit more humility, you would understand that, and you wouldn't be so easily duped, because that's what Ben Shapiro is. He's a willing dupe.
Or
he's controlled opposition,
Yes.
which is my feeling actually.
Yes.
So I mean, either way you slice it.
I
you know?
was going to say again. I love how Egypt and JFK linked very well tonight.
Yeah.
You found that wonderful segue into JFK from Egypt, and now I'm linking you back to Egypt by saying you see all the pencil neck shills that show up to have the archaeology debates to say, hey, listen, there was nothing other than the history that we have presented to you.
Right.
Shills.
Yeah.
I mean, what the hell? What the hell does it? Why did? Even if that's, everybody has an opinion. I got plenty of people. There's plenty of people in your life, my life. Everybody in the chat room has family and friends that either would think that this is cooked out conspiracy theory, how that's become a pejorative, or it's just they have no interest to.
Right. Yeah, because they think it's not relevant. Right. Right.
It's one thing to just have an opinion on something. It's another thing to say, I have got to address this right now, film me, and let's put it out there.
Yeah.
And to go after people for curiosity and saying that there is no evidence that contradicts the official government story, and even if there was, what does this one man's death 60 years ago mean to me today? I can hear him. I mean, I've heard him combat Christian theology in the same way as well.
Well, I mean, he's doing exactly what we just talked about with the people who think outside the box. And by the way, that's where progress always comes from. It never comes from the orthodoxy, from the status quo. It always comes from outside the box. Everything I do in my field, if it wasn't for people thinking differently, we would still be bloodletting. We would still be doing all the things that we were doing, 200 years ago, 100 years ago. So that's what makes me think he is an asset, because to actually try to stamp out the curiosity and label that some kind of a negative way of being, that's what's shocking. So he either genuinely has no curiosity, which makes him an NPC, or he's paid to help squash the curiosity. Either way, I've never liked Ben Shapiro. And I just trust my gut when it comes to certain things.
Yeah.
And he has been wrong about so many things. And the one thing I understand about people who are wrong, which we're all capable of, I have been wrong, but I would be the first person to come on this show if I was wrong about something, not if I was wrong about something, but if I was wrong about something that I said on the show and I was presented with evidence, I'd be like, great. I don't cling to my beliefs that way. Again, from the nutrition side, I came from believing the dietary guidelines. I grew up that way. That's what I was taught. That's what I was told. That's what I believed.
Captain Crunch and a banana in the morning.
Low fat, great for the heart.
Yeah.
I mean, so I just don't understand other people who act that way, because I'm just not that way. I'm perfectly willing to adjust course. Now that took a little bit of ego suppression. I had to say, hey, Jay, you don't have all the answers, so stop pretending like you do. And once I kind of had that conversation with myself over a couple of years, I was like, okay, I can do this. So I don't know. I don't understand that point of view on things. And I would love next time to go into some detail about some of the things that disprove. Again, my job as a defense attorney is to just disprove that Oswald did the shooting. And there are names, there are testimonies in the Warren Commission. There are things I can show you that I would say disprove the theory. Because again, no one saw him do the shooting. Why? Because he wasn't in the 6th floor.
Yeah.
During the shooting. He was on the 2nd floor in the lunchroom, which is exactly where the building manager and the first cop on the scene found him calmly drinking a Coke just minutes after the assassination. But the Warren Commission wants you to believe that he did the shooting, then he stashed the gun on the other side of the 6th floor, ran down the only stairwell in the building to the 2nd floor, got a Coke, and then started drinking it in the building to appear completely calm in front of the police officer when the police officer rushed into the building to figure out what had gone wrong.
And then went to a movie.
Yeah. I mean, come on.
We can talk about that.
We'll go through it piece
like
by
I said,
piece.
there's things that all you need to do is destroy. You have to live within that shadow of a doubt. Like I was saying with Russia back in the day, I used to be able to give you Bruce and Nelly or this, Natalia Veselnitskaya, that Fusion GP.
Nice.
I could have done the whole thing because we were doing it every night.
Yeah.
Because we were living a true crime international thriller from 2017 to 19. And for a time there, we're just like, oh, these people are going to get nailed. And of course, they didn't, at least then, maybe, who knows. But for a time, I knew all that stuff. And then after a while, like you say, your brain almost gets overloaded with stuff. And if you're really into something, you can retain a lot. But what you really need to do is prioritize something. And what takes everything apart? For Russiagate with me, it was just like that whole George Papadopoulos and Joseph Mifsud interaction was everything. Because it's either Papadopoulos was a patsy or a plant.
Right.
You know, a patsy or a plant or a plant turned patsy, whatever it's illegit. The whole thing is illegitimate, and they have created this little that's what they go out to, the lunch in what's his name? What was the other guy's name? Shit, Stephen Halper. It was George Papadopoulos and Joseph Mifsud and fat Stephen Halper in the UK and talking about their shit about you have dirt and do you have dirt. It was so nonsense, so bullshit, just to be able to create a predicate to go and start a phony investigation.
Yeah, the
whole thing about we've got a wound, we got one shot from a guy. You say 3 bullets, all that stuff. We can see him get shot.
Yeah.
We can see trajectories of where his head is going back.
Dan Rather lied about the Zapruder film. Either he didn't see it or he went out there intentionally and lied and said that Kennedy was shot and slumped forward. A complete and utter reversal of the film.
And he made his bones with that.
But do you know that once he started touring colleges, I was reading this, he was touring colleges. And people, because apparently the Zapruder film was debuted on Geraldo Rivero's night show, like some show in the 70s at night. I remember that was when it premiered to the public, but it had been making its way underground because it had been copied. So there were like underground copies of this making its way around colleges. And when Dan Rather was touring colleges, doing his little speaking tour about the Kennedy assassination, you know that he was met with chants of back and to the left? Because people knew that he was full of shit.
I didn't know this.
Yeah. It's pretty cool, right? So Dan Rather's always been a shill. So who's he shilling for, right? And I would love to break some of that stuff down because...
Well, listen, you're going to be back with me in a week.
Yeah. So maybe there'll be more, information that's come out by then. But even just the actual act of the assassination and people who did or didn't see Oswald Ware is just fascinating.
Okay.
Fascinating.
We'll do a lot of this because I maybe by that time we can actually do a little bit of searching ourselves.
Yeah.
I have not learned how to load any of this stuff up into Grok and ask it to go look for things because, as I said before, it's all images. Yeah. So it's not like you open up a doc file and hit Control F.
I know.
And so I don't know how to prompt this stuff yet. Like for example,
there's got to be somebody in your audience that's good at that, right?
Well, that's the other thing. That's what's very important. It's very important to know how to do this because then you can take the files directly from wherever you can download them from an official source, load them up yourself so that you're not getting duped because there's so many. God knows how many Kennedy UFO shit is going to be forged now. There's going to be so many fake things that pop up along the way just for lulls.
There are fake ones out there. And I think that's one of the things that America's Untold Stories, that guy, he talks about that quite a bit. And there's like a number series on the official archive documents, so but he said there's one document that's been out there for 10 years that is a known forgery, but it keeps getting kind of recycled because if it confirms
people are
your bias,
they're looking for UFO stuff.
Yeah. And if it confirms whatever other bias, you're going to be like, oh, look, this document. And he's like, that's a fake document. So yeah, you have to be careful with that kind of stuff. I mean, all of us have to be careful with that stuff.
All right. Well, let me get to some super chats and then we're out of here.
Holy crap. It's 9:00.
I know. It's 9:00. Fascinating topics tonight, Frank and Jay. Great show. Thank you from Jay Brits.
Yeah.
I appreciate
this
you.
Is fun.
Grace says, good evening, Frank and Jay. Does Jay ever enjoy an alcoholic beverage? If so, what is it? Loving you all from Venice. I love you, Grace. Thank you so much. What is it? Do you have an alcoholic beverage?
I don't drink very often at all, but if I would, it would probably just be like a red wine, maybe.
All right. Special occasion, you're going for the red wine.
Yeah.
All right. Yeah, I don't know. I drink seasonally and I drink according to the occasion. Around Christmas time, I have a lot more scotches with in-laws and whatever. In summertime is probably the only time of year that I would have a beer and actually enjoy it. Mm-hmm. And I drink it as fast as I can because while it's still cold, or else I'll nurse it forever.
Right.
But
Yeah, I'm not like a teetotaler. I don't, but it, like you, just special occasions and, as long as it's clean. The thing about beer is that, unfortunately, if it's not organic, it's probably got glyphosate in it, unfortunately.
Hey, Grace, I see Grace, please get in touch with me in email because thank you so much for your generous tip. But I see 2 tips. I see 2 super chats that say the same exact thing that are separated by at least 25 minutes. So I don't know if that is an error or if you actually did it twice thinking I didn't see it. I did see it, and I don't want you to pay double. So just get in touch with me, please. I want to make sure that everything's it's not. I just want to make sure it's not a glitch, that you aren't charged twice. Let me see here. Stow Soup, that's from yesterday. Thank you, Stow Soup. I love you. K Corvin. Oh, this is up on the Rumble. K Corvin 2400 says started homeschooling our youngest now 16. 2 years ago. Best decision ever. History class is our bookcase. Don Jeffries' books are the best. Only found him because of your show. Thanks, Frank.
Nice.
I got in touch with Don. I didn't even get around to our thread over here. This is from the YouTube. From the Twitter. I said, has anything in the JFK release changed whatsoever? Whatever your conclusions had been already drawn about 11/22/63. People said they're just shocked that there was any mention of Israel. That has come up a couple of times. My mind isn't changed, but I found this fascinating that JFK Jr. hand wrote a note to Joe Biden calling him a traitor.
Yeah,
did you see this?
I did see that.
Yeah, hold on. Let me get Jay out of the way.
That's not a surprise.
Yeah, look at that. Yeah, August 26, 1994, bearing the hand-printed address, Senator Joseph Biden, Delaware, Democrat, U.S. Capitol Building. Dear Senator Biden, you are a traitor. Bearing the signature, John F. Kennedy Jr. And I actually tagged Don Jeffries on that because he was one of the only people that we had an in-depth John conversation with. He knows a lot of the play-by-play with John's his.
That's a super interesting rabbit hole.
Oh, his death is incredible.
Yeah.
Even down to the very zipped up way that they had the funeral at sea, and everything. But what kind of threat was he? Because he had, in his adult years, he become increasingly obsessed with knowing about what happened to his father.
And wasn't he running or about to run against Hillary Clinton for the Senate
New
seat?
York Senate.
Yeah.
He would still be our senator.
Oh,
no, he would have already been president.
Oh, yeah, I believe it.
He would have already been, but that you want to talk about an apple cart being upset.
Uh-huh.
I said, Don Jeffries, what do you think about this portion? And I have to get Don on for this. He said, that's fascinating. I hadn't seen that yet. I wrote about this a bit in American Memory Hole. It's hard to imagine JFK Jr. saying that, but who knows? I still need to sift through the documents. Rumor is there was a Federal Reserve memo that was pretty damning. Thank you. Yeah. Also remember, guys and gals, that what is also a very responsible way of assuming that the most written out in black and white testament to what happened that day and who did it and who pulled the triggers and all that stuff was never going to be preserved ever. The other thing there too is that the people who run this system and archive this stuff are also, we're talking about the CIA, who invested in conspiracy theories. They invested in flooding the information space with things that would muddy up the joint. Who knows how much of this stuff that we are watching that is actually being declassified and released to the public right now have been planted years ago as poison pills. So in the event that this ever came out, that there's just more stuff out there.
Yeah.
There's aspects of the stuff that we're reading that might have been designed for public consumption for one reason or another years ago.
Sure.
You just got to think about that stuff and keep filtering.
We're all in this together.
Indeed we are. So that's what I got on any of that stuff over on quitefrankly.tv. Terrific Thursday greetings, family. One love, Lynn. Thank you. Stuck in New York says, cheers, Frank. Kicking ass as per usual. Thank you, sir. Stephen and Laurie says, Frank and Jay kicking it off with laughs. This is going to be the best JFK reveal convo. It was. I think it was. And we'll do more next week.
Yeah.
Well, because we'll have more time to read through what's already out there, and apparently we're getting 20,000 more.
I want you to start a poll and see, because I was going to offer this last year or 2 years ago during the 60th anniversary, but I want to go to Dealey Plaza. I've never been. I want to go there before they change it, because there's a rumor that they're trying to do some reconstruction, let's just say, to modernize it. I would love to go there and do like a live report for Quite Frankly on November 22nd this year. So if your audience wants to see me go, I would be happy to, we'll figure something out technologically. But I would love to take you guys to Dealey Plaza. It'd have to be an earlier show so you could catch it during the day. But maybe we could pre-record it even or something. I don't know. I just thought that would be fun. I've always wanted to see it, and I would love to take you and the audience along if you guys were interested. So let me know if that's something anybody would even want. But I would make that trip for you guys.
We don't need to start a poll. People would be like, yes, get out there.
Tell me where you want me to stand. You want me to stand behind the picket fence if I can get there? What do you want me to do?
Well, see.
Want me to lay on the grassy knoll? What do you want me to do?
Like you said, if I go live at 7 o'clock, it would be 6 o'clock in Dallas.
Yeah, so it might be kind of dark.
It's going to be dark in November, which sucks because I would love it for it to be a live spot.
Yeah, I know. Oh, so maybe we could do it not on, what day is the 22nd? Maybe, we don't have to do it on the 22nd.
Siri, what day of the year is November 22nd this year? Yeah, thanks a lot.
Frank, it's a lot quicker for me to just do this. November 22nd is a Saturday. Okay, so maybe we do the 21st, because actually the assassination happened on a Friday. Anyway, so we do it on the 21st, which is a Friday, and we could do it, just earlier in the day so that it's not as dark. I don't know. We could figure something out. I would just love to do it. I've always wanted to see it, and if I could do something for the show and be like a little bit of a correspondent, I think that would be really fun.
You know what you could do? Stream during the day. Get everything, gather whatever you can during the day. You send me the files, and then you call in, you zoom in at night. And we just we play the video, and I'll pause when you want me to pause and say that, draw people's attention to places.
All right, I'm thinking it would be fun.
Yeah,
I think it'd be a lot of fun.
Well, listen, if you have the flexibility to go travel like that, then go do it.
All right.
Anyway, here's a little bit more. Let's see here. Porpoiseful, thank you. Boys Blanc, thank you. IC says Frank on point as ever. I don't know what I said at that point. This is earlier in the show.
Probably everything.
C Blanche, thank you. Captain Flint says Tesla terrorists have inspired me to buy a Ram 2500 Cummins diesel.
Yeah, seriously.
Oh, I know.
I want the one that gives me 5 miles to the gallon.
I'm getting something big. I'm getting something big and rumbling and loud. Stowstube sends an EMP. Love you, Stowstube. Says J Gulinello in the house once again. Can someone say bonus? Great reason to drop a little something beyond extra in support of wonderful independent media. Thank you, Frank and Jay, for a great listen tonight. Best in-house guest ever. Love J Gulinello nights. Me too.
Well, thank you very much.
Me too.
I'm glad you guys get to see a different side of me. It's not always just biochemistry and
listen, I know
processed foods.
It's knowing that we can go effectively into so many directions, man. I think it's only a plus. It really is. Safety Net says positive, high vibes, family of the Frankly Collective. Many thanks for Jesse James Gulinello. As always,
That's
one
a
love.
good one.
Lynn.
I like that one.
The Sentinel says great show, Frank. We love it when Giuseppe is on. He says there's no tax. The no tax on 150K was announced by Secretary of Commerce Howard Lutnick.
Okay. That's it. Yep.
That's okay.
Hey, that would be a great place to start.
It would be a nice place to start because then, $150,000 is what people would call. It's crazy that should be considered middle class now.
I know.
It's not a lot.
No.
It's not a lot. The Sentinel. Thank you. Homegoy says Ryan Dawson has a documentary that implicates Israel for Numek nuclear facility. Yeah. The nuclear development and nuclear proliferation, and also just general geopolitical interests in that respect they're pronounced in this, which is incredible.
And they do cover that in the in Destiny Betrayed. They cover Jack Kennedy's foreign policy. So they do the lead up explaining his presidency, and then they go through it. So it's really well done.
What we couldn't do tonight was the bigger overarching questions that I had about everything. And that is, of course, the moment that we're in. I guess I'll leave this as an opening.
This is part 2. This is part 1. Part 2 is next Friday.
Yeah. And of course, and let me just say, Foxy Lady, Thank you so much. I'm going to release the scratching. Let me just do that real quick. So that's out of the way, and that is being done. And I'll go over to D Live and did Rumble. Did I get everybody on Rumble? Oh, there's one more. Motoron on Rumble says, God bless you, Frank and Jay. Thank you, Motoron. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And yeah, okay, so all the super chats are out of the way. This moment right here, and we can pick this up on next Friday too, is the part of the reason why I believe some people feel most comfortable living in black pill land. It's because there's a lot more in this release than I expected. Mm-hmm. Nothing that hasn't been written about in the past, but again, there are disclosures here that back up prior confirmations.
Right.
You know, and I think that moments like these are why, especially in so-called truth circles, getting let down is safer, because then we just get to keep our suspicions and our grumbling pessimism about things. But at this point, you know, we have just a little bit more validation, but the question is, what comes next? Now that we weren't just completely let down, I mean, we asked what comes next. First of all, did this raise your approval rating for Trump going out on a limb like this? Mm-hmm. Other people say when it comes to, well, what do you do when it comes to, you know, seeking justice for a person who's been gone for 60 years, and how most of the people who are involved with his assassination are gone? We know that we're dealing with new generations of that same operation. Mm-hmm. You know, it's literally the progeny of,
without a doubt,
of that. So the real question is, what does justice look like all these years later? Obviously, it's got to be education. People need to know where we came from and who was involved and why. But the other thing there too is all those sources of unauthorized power, of, you know, those, you know, secrecy being repugnant to a free land. The basis of that very famous speech that he put forward. Mm-hmm. There is a repugnancy there that needs to be completely disassembled. And it is a cancer that fights tooth and nail against its disassembly. Absolutely. And I don't, as the days go on, you know, anybody who even knew somebody that was involved with that are going to be gone soon. So the real question is, how do we set the record straight on certain things and make sure that all undue influences, foreign and domestic, can't get in anymore? Right. That's the real thing. What, you know, when we're making all of our decisions locally, from local sound ordinance and who gets to you know, patrol the dog park, to how we're educating ourselves, how we're feeding ourselves, money creation, all of that stuff. So it's that's the question where I'm at.
And I don't think you can make it about revenge. I think you can just make it about justice. And justice has no time limit. There's no statute of limitations. The truth is the truth. And if it was you or I think all I would want, if that happened to me, if I was John F. Kennedy, all I would want is that someday the truth be known, right? I mean, that's all you can ask for. I mean, because once you're gone, you're gone. It doesn't matter if anybody is punished necessarily. We feel like that in the worldly sense. It would be nice to see punishments, but now that that's virtually impossible, all we want is the truth so that we can learn from it. I think it's the best thing that we can hope for in all this. Yeah,
that's it. Okay, so we will put a pause on this until next Friday, the 28th, and it'll be a great day. For now, here's what's coming up after the show. It's actually quite a great thing that Jay's in tonight, because as soon as we finish now,
Too much.
It's 9:15, and we did a little bit of overtime. But as soon as we finish here at the other end of the end credits on QuiteFrankly.tv, here's what we have coming up: the Functional Human Podcast, episode 11 with Jay and Daryl. What do you guys talk about in this episode?
I don't know.
Okay, well, listen. It won't be JFK.
No, it's not JFK.
It won't be JFK. Then you got Razor Fist. The court has made its decision. Now let them enforce it. Yeah, good one. Brian McClanahan, time to topple the 14th Amendment. Tucker Carlson interviews Bob Lighthizer. Mr. Ballin, the stunning consequences of 3 small choices that changed everything. The Confessionals, Fallen Angel Tech under Giza. I was talking about if it's there, if what they're saying is under there is real, it's not human.
Oh, this is going to be fun.
Okay. Mind Unveiled, Anti-Masons, Occult Government and the Puppet Show. This After Hours tonight is going to be fantastic. It starts on quitefrankly.tv. Right after this, you can cast it right to your television. Whatever the hell it is, enjoy it. Get into the chat room. Mix it up with people. I'll be in there to stop by and say hello before you know it. I just got to get home and kick my feet up first and upload the podcast. But I'll be there eventually. Jay, thanks for everything.
Yeah. Thank you for having me.
Find Perpetual Health CO on Rumble, on Instagram, and soon he'll have a new presentation on his website, right?
Yeah. Right now, though, Instagram and Rumble are the things that are really motoring. It's Perpetual Health CO on both of those. Come over, follow, and that's where we get more of me, more of Daryl. Now that Rumble, thank you, Frank and Frankly's, for getting it up over 1,000. Now we can do live Q&As. That's going to be fun.
Hell yeah.
So go over there and we'll have a blast.
Good. All right, everybody. Have a good night. I'll see you tomorrow for the finale. Comedian Mike Baldwin will be joining me as a co-host in the beginning there, and hopefully I have a lot of funny stuff to do. So good night and be well. No, I skipped an entire thing.
I'll catch you on the flip side.